I'm really excited to be here. I love Australia, love Melbourne. It is a completely fantastic city. I guess if I had one complaint, it's that I haven't been able to find any truly Australian beer yet. I've been out looking for Fosters everywhere, but I haven't found any. So if you can help me out after. Okay. So yeah, I'm Sean. I'm going to be talking about how I'm saving the world with Ruby. But before I get started, I just want to give a shout out to the Ruby community. That is probably the best community out there. We all have the jobs we do because of free work, all these open source people out there that are just contributing, so we have jobs that we love, and which is fantastic. And if I can just give a shout out to Sandy Metz. I was talking to her at the RubyConf USA in November, and I told Sandy I was coming here to speak, and she said, "Sean, you're gonna do great." And but that's just Sandy, because Sandy's like the nicest person in the world. But then about 2 hours later, Sandy came running up to me, and she gave me these. I don't know if you can see them. It's WWSMD. And so I was just blown away. Like Sandy found the time to run out and get some "What Would Sean Marcia Do" stickers made. And it's just like, wow, Sandy, I love this community. So in my talk, I'm going to give you a little bit of a history of the project. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the technology, and then I'm going to tell you how you can get involved in similar things. But mostly I'm going to tell you a story about bees. And my story with bees began when I was 6 years old. And for reference, this is me at 6. I love that sweater. Back when I was 6, my best friend and I, we were out wandering, and we found a wild beehive. And if you know 6-year-old boys, you can probably guess what we did. Yeah, we started throwing rocks at it. And for whatever reason, my good friend, he got stung a few dozen times, but the bees left me alone. And I kind of feel like I owe them a karmic debt now for not stinging me. But let's jump forward to today. Like I said, I work at a university, and I was wandering across campus one day, and I saw this gentleman giving a talk. This is Herman Priya, and he was giving a talk about Amazonian stingerless honeybees. And like all of you guys, I became a software developer because I like free swag. And so since he was giving out honey samples, I'm like, oh, perfect. And I sat down with him after his talk, because it was really interesting, and he told me a lot of interesting things about bees. And so if you take nothing else away from my talk, take this away in case you guys ever get on Jeopardy. Bees are cool. They're crazy, crazy hard workers. Like a bee will only live 3 to 6 weeks during the honey gathering stages, but if it's not during the honey gathering, like it's winter, they'll live 3 to 6 months. One bee can visit 50,000 flowers, and in its life will only gather like 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey. In North America, there are over 4,000 kinds of bees, and over 90% of all wild flowers and plants are pollinated by bees. And I think it's about 65% of our food is because of bees. Either they pollinate the food we eat, or they pollinate the food our food eats. But the bees are dying, and it's really serious. In North America, about 35% of managed bees have died out, and like these are bees where there's a beekeeper and an apiary and someone looking after them. Wild bees, it's even more serious. In some areas, it's 90% of them. In the state where I'm working, it's about 67% of the bees have died. And it's not just North America's problem. In the United Kingdom, they're predicting by 2018 there aren't going to be any bees left. Europe, Asia, India, it's particularly scary in India because of all their pollination happens because of wild, undomesticatable honeybee. And, as I said, it's the wild bees that are getting hit the hardest, so it's kind of scary. And thankfully, it's starting to pick up in the news. I'm sure you've probably seen on Netflix, or you guys don't get Netflix here, but if you had Netflix, you could see that there's documentaries out there. It's Time magazine. It's all being covered. And so, which brings me back to Herman. He's studying this colony collapse disorder, and it sounded pretty serious. And so, in the colony collapse disorder is when a hive collapses, and here are some of the possible causes. Like, I have one of my own theories in there, but it's not catching on in the beekeeping community, but I have faith it will. But yeah, it's pesticides, mites, genetic factors, they just don't know. And so I did a little research, and this might be Australian honeybees. So now I don't feel bad about that Foster's joke. And so obviously I wanted to help. You know, I don't know anything about bees, but you know, like I asked Herman, what can I do to help? This sounds kind of serious. And so, you know, Herman had a wish list. He wanted some money, and I guess he assumed I knew Mark Zuckerberg or someone I could call up, but that wasn't an option. And so the second thing he wanted to do was he wanted to monitor beehives. It's like, okay, I can figure that out. And it turned out he already had a bunch of beehives at George Mason University, and they were up on top of a parking garage. And so that's them up on the 5th or 6th floor, and you can see the top of another building there. And so why he wanted some insights into the temperature in the hive, the weight, and he also wanted the outside temperature and weight. And obviously because you should see the weight of a beehive, like, you know, linearly going up over the course of a year. And the cool thing about bees is they keep the internal temperature of a hive at the exact same temperature year-round. It doesn't matter if it's the middle of summer or the middle of winter, they keep the temperature the same. It's kind of neat. When they pull out beehives, or like the honeycombs from the hives, in the past they always assumed that the unfilled combs in the hive were just because the bees hadn't filled them up yet. But it turns out that there's a special bee that breaks its wings off and crawls into that hole and just spends all day long vibrating to generate heat. It's a crappy life, but someone's got to do it. And similarly, like they have bees that they'll take heat and they'll absorb it into their body and they'll take it elsewhere and dissipate it. And they know this because some scientists they applied heat to the hive and watched the bees do that. I guess I should say some jerk scientists applied heat to a hive and watched them do that. And he wanted the outside temperature and humidity just as control, because if you don't see the weight going up, perhaps it's because it's been snowing or raining or something like that. And so again, looking at the hives up there on the 6th floor, we can see some problems, like it's open to the elements, there isn't any power, we had a really low budget, I think we had $175 to start, and we needed something that was really simple to maintain and repair and cheap. And so, starting with no power, this was really the low-hanging fruit of it all. And I solved that by going out and getting some solar panels and a deep cell battery, and that was that. And now with a limited budget, that was again solved by I used Raspberry Pis, just because most people have some Raspberry Pis at home because they buy them, they think they're going to do a project, and then they don't use them. And so I just asked all my friends, hey, who has a Raspberry Pi? And I want to save the bees, and they all thought that was cool, so they gave me the Raspberry Pis. But really, my value added to the project was like this MacGyver-like ability to solve problems. And if I can give you an example of that, when we were putting one of the probes, our initial probe into the hive, we realized it was a cheaply made probe, so we had to protect this probe. And so, you know, me racking my brain, what can I do? I ran right away to Campus Health Services, and I asked for a handful of condoms, and I thought, okay, I'll just wrap it in a condom and put it in the hive. Like, it only occurred to me after that the people in Campus Health Services have probably seen things that I can't even imagine, because I'd just been outdoors all day, and I was all dirty when I walked in there. I was carrying duct tape and rope, and I asked for a handful of condoms, and they didn't even flinch. So, things they've seen. And then I realized you guys might not know who MacGyver is, because maybe he's a North American thing. So this is MacGyver in 3 slides. So it wasn't perfect, but you know, I had a start. And since I had a little server running, this little Raspberry Pi, I might as well throw in Twitter, so I can connect it to social media. And our initial results, bang, we have the bees tweeting a little picture, the camera's off, and I guess the temperature sensor wasn't correctly placed because the temperature should be a little higher than that, but it was a start. And it's kind of interesting, when you're on social media and you're tweeting from a university account, people assume you're an expert, I guess, because, you know, as soon as we tweeted this out, within a day, someone sent us a message, how do I get my dog to stop eating bees? Let him eat some bees. But But so, you know, I Google it, and it turns out lots of dogs like to eat bees. You know, little dogs, medium-sized dogs, and big dogs. So who's been in the Ruby community long enough to know this acronym? I see a few hands. This was started by Brian Lyles. So if you go to Ruby conferences, you might see this on shirts. And it stands for test all the something time. I forget what the F stands for. But no offense to Brian Lyles, but he's wrong. What the acronym should be is try awesome things, forget testing. And because if you forget testing, stuff like this happens. And now you're thinking, well, why is that a good thing? Well, people find it funny when a beehive's tweeting that's 500 degrees, and you can see people asking for breeding fire bees. But it turned out to be this really great thing for us because it was like a social media explosion, or as Nick would say, it created a social media buzz. And so, but you know, because we were getting retweeted, and like the city of Virginia's retweeting us, and all these different organizations, like everything really just started to happen really fast for us. Like it brought us into the attention of the Sweet Virginia Foundation, and like who they are, they're a nonprofit who teaches about honeybees and honeybee education, and you know, they reached out to us and they wanted to help. They didn't have money, but they had land all over Virginia that we could have access to, and you know, Herman wanted to teach a class of researchers about this, and so you know, we just had to raise some money, and so we started a Kickstarter campaign, or sorry, Indiegogo campaign. I always get that wrong. And we raised $12,000, not 10, so we were able to have a class of 12 students, and it was really, really amazing. They opened this class up, it filled up in less than an hour, and there were 168 people on the waiting list, and just people want to help. But again, though, like this really again led to another social media explosion for us, like this Kickstarter campaign, the social media, and like all of campus sort of just became aware of us, and like one of the fraternities started their Bee Global, the university magazine was all about the bees, and then this gentleman with Herman, that's the president of the university, and the cool thing is when the president gets involved, well, you suddenly have a budget. And with that budget, Herman went and he traveled around. He started some other programs he was really interested in, including traveling around Central America and South America, teaching like beekeeping, sustainability, and beekeeping programs to indigenous people to help them with income and whatnot. And it's been wildly successful, which is fantastic. But now let's get to the interesting stuff, the technology. And Raspberry Pis, not pies. That's important because when you tell your coworkers you're going to be working with Raspberry Pis, they mysteriously just start showing up at your office with a different idea in their head. And so if you're not familiar with a Raspberry Pi, that's what it is. It's a credit card sized computer. And I can't just have this, I need a banana and a scale to show you the size. So there's one with a banana and a scale. And so Raspberry Pis have these GPIO pins if you're thinking about doing a similar project. And if you've ever opened up a desktop computer and looked at the back of your hard drive, you've probably seen something like this. And this is one with one of my sensors plugged in. And these are the 3 gems. If you are going to play with it, I'd recommend starting with in this order. And now to the Ruby, it's powered by Ruby and Sinatra. And again, the reason why I use Sinatra and not Rails is I was trying to keep it as simple as I could. Didn't want to have to explain, you know, Rails controllers and spitting out JSON and all these Rails intricacies that people just don't need. And so actually I just ended up finally just going with the dashing gem. If you're not familiar with dashing, it's a way of creating dashboards. And it works just like Rails. You do dashing new rather than like Rails new, and you create a project, and this was our dashboard. And you would go within range one of the beehives, you would connect to it wirelessly, and you could check out all the stats. And how is this powered? With three cron jobs, and that's it. And if you're not familiar with cron, it's just a Unix utility that runs something on a schedule. And you probably see one of them is a Python script, but that was just because it came with the scale and I didn't want to bother rewriting it. And this is all the code it takes to grab the temperature and humidity readings. Just grabbing a little bit of making them into a CSV file and put it in the public folder. And the reason it's in the public folder, again, just to keep it simple, so the researchers, when they go to the hive and if they want the data, they can just type in the name of the CSV file and it downloads to their computer. And this is the dashing code to spit out that data onto a dashboard. And the Python code, if anyone cares. And so the other things I used Passenger as a web server and a couple Linux packages for setting up a wireless access point and wireless. And I hope everyone thinks that was pretty simple. And I think it's so simple that anyone in this room could do it. And I want everyone in here to do something like this because, you know, I think we're all amazing, and we kind of get into this Silicon Valley ivory tower mindset where we have to get our queuing speeds down by 0.08 of a second, and we have to, you know, argue over should we use inheritance or composition or all these things. But, you know, the rest of the world, you know, doesn't live in the Silicon Valley mindset. You know, like I work at a university, and every day I see people solving problems by mailing text files back and forth and Excel files and Word documents, and you know, educators I think really need our help, or at least educators in America. Maybe you fully fund your schools here, but it's super easy to get involved. And if you're wondering how, I would just say, you know, pick something that interests you. Like for me, I work with a professor who's doing some wine and beer research. You know, I like beer, I like wine. I work with a Pompeii and a bee professor. But it's really easy. Like most universities will publish a schedule of talks and go out and find a professor and talk to them. And even though they're PhDs and this and that, they are happy to talk. Like I know you think programmers have giant personalities and egos. That's nothing compared to a professor. They love to talk about themselves. And they need our help. And I know right now you're thinking, come on, Sean, are all you Canadians socialists? What's in it for me? I already give back. I seed my torrents, you know. Well, I run a meetup group in North America, probably the best Ruby meetup group in North America, so I guess probably the best in the world then. But and new Rubyists, they all have the same question, it seems. You know, like they all have this goal that they want to achieve, but they just can't get at. Like they want it, but and what that goal is they want to get involved in open source, and they just don't know how. And by doing things like this, it's an easy gateway into open source. And you can get a project. And there's a lot of intangible benefits, you know, like Nick with the bee pun. Like I hear bee puns every day, and you know, depending on your project, you may not hear bee puns. You might hear a different kind of pun, but you learn a lot of interesting things. Like I didn't know anything about bees before I started this project. And great to talk to people. It's fun. And so if this is the kind of thing that does interest you, and you think, hey, I want to get involved in something like this, I'd like to invite you to come to Ruby for Good this year. And what Ruby for Good is, it's a conference, I guess. We stay in university dorms. We all hack on civic good projects, like think animal shelters, boys and girls clubs. Basically the kind of people that really need people like you and me, like our skills, but can't afford us. And the projects are generally just simple CRUD apps, but they need our help. And this is our logo. It's a world that's full of love because it's embracing Ruby. And our little GW in the bottom is our shout out to Jim Wyrick because we think he'd approve and because he was awesome. And finally, the reason we do all this is it's because of Mina Swan and my Ruby group. We make these 8-bit math stickers for Minneswan. You know, Matt's is nice, and so we are nice, the tenants of the Ruby community. So I'd invite you to come find me after and get a sticker if you'd like one. And that's all. Thank you so much for your time.